Good morning, my fellow taxonomy enthusiasts. I hope you're all well rested, caffeinated, and ready for another action-packed day of taxonomy fun. This is going to be a great day. We're starting off strong with this presentation. I'll introduce our speaker in a second, but just give you a quick recap of what's going to happen today. We have a few case studies right after the lunch break. Then we have a sort of mini workshop with Heather Hedden on turning a taxonomy into an ontology. And then my favorite session of the whole conference comes up at the end of the day today, which is Stump the Taxonomist. This is an open panel. We have 3 panelists. It's moderated by Zach Wall, and we take questions from the audience, and you have the chance to vote up the questions that you're the most interested in. And the people who ask the best question get prizes. So please join us for the last panel of the day, Stump the Taxonomist. It is pure fun. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Dave Clarke. You've probably seen him in some of the keynotes earlier in the conference. He is the founder of Synaptica, and he's going to be talking to us about how the role of taxonomy is continuing to change and expand. Take it away, Dave.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Hello to everyone joining Taxonomy Bootcamp. Great to be with you today. So my topic, well, actually, let me just explain what Synaptica does. We're a software business, and we have a simple mission, which is to help people organize, categorize, and discover the knowledge in their enterprise. And we do this with taxonomy and knowledge graphs. So the talk today, I'm going to cover, I'm going to start by recapping what some of the traditional uses for taxonomy are, and then I'm going to spend the majority of the time talking about new uses for taxonomy that are sort of outside of that traditional domain, and then we'll have a little bit of Q&A at the end of the session. So let's start by reviewing traditional uses for
Sorry, Dave, I don't think you're sharing your slides. You might want to share your screen.
Okay. I'm sharing screen. Let me share. Let me know if that comes through now.
Sure is.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Stephanie, for catching that. Okay, so we're going to start with traditional uses of taxonomy. And the main use for taxonomy is about building a bridge between the language that your users are speaking and the language that's used in content. That is really the end game, is to help people search and discover and find the needle in the haystack in their content. And part of that is helping people to identify what's most relevant or salient, and to provide browsing experience and content recommendations. Speaking the language of users derives from the fact that one thing can be described by multiple words, and one word can describe multiple things, and that results in ambiguous terminology. It results in noisy search results that have a lot of irrelevant hits and aren't necessarily complete. So getting taxonomy right means that we can help to standardize enterprise terminology, map together equivalent terms, bring in rich synonym sets, etc., deal with multilingual search and retrieval. And these capabilities in taxonomy can enhance search in multiple ways. It can do the disambiguation. Did you mean X or did you mean Y? It can expand a query with the synonym sets and language equivalents, and it can help to redirect queries. So the user types in X, and the taxonomy can prompt to offer narrower filtering options, or to allow them to take a step backwards and go into the broader categories. And query refinement can often work with faceted search and faceted navigation, allowing you to zone in by multiple parameters. So taxonomy does a lot to improve search. When we talk about tagging terminology, tagging content, we're really talking about 2 different things. And this is whether this is human categorization or auto categorization. There's really 2 fundamentally different things that are going on. Semantic tagging is identifying the many individual concepts and named entities that are mentioned within the full text of a document. So if you take a document, you might find that 20 different things in a taxonomy are mentioned within that document, and semantic tagging needs to capture all of those, and it needs to disambiguate the plain lexical text in the document using the taxonomy to help provide that disambiguation. But categorization is a little bit different. Categorization is about identifying the few concepts and named entities that best describe the whole document, which is often called the aboutness of the document. And categorization uses the semantic tagging, but then it will apply relevancy ranking, document zone relevancy. Where you find a concept in a document is as important as the number of times you find it. And then the semantic structure of the taxonomy can also help with inferencing about what is the most relevant and important matter in a document. The next area that traditional taxonomy helps is browsing experiences, and they are one of the primary use cases for taxonomy-enhanced search and discovery. So browsability helps to provide context by placing concepts and content into logical groupings. And the groupings can be alphabetical, hierarchical, ranked. You can have visualizations, particularly one of the exciting things that comes out of going to graph-based taxonomies is you can get some pretty cool visualizations of the graphs and sets of related and connected material. Matrices and galleries are also important views, and particularly in e-commerce sites, you will see a lot of grid-like views as results are presented to the user. All of these can be driven and powered by taxonomy. Last but not least is content recommendations. So if you want to see the best content recommendations, just use any of the leading e-commerce platforms. So the little phrases that are on the left of this slide here all come from one of those very big e-commerce platforms that everyone uses all the time. And these are things that their recommendation engine is saying. It's, you know, if you watch this, you may also want to watch this. Compare to similar products. If you buy X, you may want to buy this accessory or this refill, etc. So frequently bought together. All of these kinds of content recommendations can be driven by the associative relationships and the intersections that you will find in taxonomy. And also particularly with e-commerce platforms, there's an intersection between what the taxonomy knows about the metadata of content that's being viewed and similar metadata, and also criteria about the individual user who is viewing and their purchasing history and their viewing history. So to summarize the traditional use cases for taxonomy, they're all about content, all about search and the discovery of content. And that's achieved by creating control vocabularies and curating those control vocabularies, whether they are with topics, named entities, people, places, products, brands, etc. And then applying those taxonomies as consistent metadata onto content. When that's done, you can provide those taxonomy-driven search, browse, and recommendation experiences. And this is the bedrock of taxonomy, traditional taxonomy. We did a presentation at Taxonomy Bootcamp London earlier this year, joint with the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, who are using our software to manage an ontology to drive search and discovery of their content. And if you go to our presentation section on the website, you can download the PowerPoint, and there's a video recording of that. It's a good case study of using taxonomy for traditional purposes to improve search and browse. So now let's move into the main section, which is what about non-traditional applications for taxonomies. I'm going to look today at these examples, and then I'll summarize at the end some of the common themes that we can see through these different examples. So customer relationship management, one area; human resources management; engineering, design; PIM, product information management; supply chains; and business process management. These are and this is not an exhaustive list of non-traditional, but these are the topics that I've got time to cover today. I'll have a look at the first one, which is CRM. So in customer relationship management applications, you're really dealing with the processing of live interactions with customers, and that can be correspondence routing, live phone calls, chatbot processing, etc. One of the things that taxonomy can help with here is the taxonomy tags become used as decision criteria in a decision tree. So how you tag an inbound call or a piece of correspondence ends up working through a flowchart of decision criteria and then triggering automated actions. So this is obviously different than search and discovery, search and retrieval. This slide is a real-life example of one of our customers who are using their taxonomy to drive their CRM experiences. And in this particular simple flow here, basically the inbound physical letter or email gets logged by a case manager and assigned one or more taxonomy subject terms. The subject terms link to organizational units in the CRM, and that triggers the routing of the correspondence to the relevant organizations and individuals through the CRM system to answer the query. So a fairly simple, in this case, very simple routing objective with taxonomy triggering the routing to particular teams within the organization. Similar but slightly different is this second case, again provided by a Synaptica Graphite customer. They have live call centers, and as the calls come in, the CRM operator assigns one or more subject taxonomy terms, and these get linked through to briefing sheets, and the briefing sheets then pull up a series based on the process flows of the taxonomy. They retrieve briefing sheets to go through a structured Q&A process with the inbound call. So the call operator is essentially driving the Q&A session in a very structured way through the use of the taxonomy, and through that structure the organization achieves more consistency in the answers that they provide to callers, and they're also able to make sure they cover all the essential briefing points rather than just rely on what comes to memory for a particular call operator. So improvements to the quality and consistency of call center processing through the use of taxonomy. Lastly, in this CRM area is yet another example that was provided by a real-life user, and this is the management of employee directory profiles. So in this particular scenario, in the employee directory, employees do a self-tagging process to tag their roles, their responsibilities, their professions, and their skills. And the values for these different facets of employee information, of course, derived from taxonomy. So, but it's a self-tagging process that the individuals do. And that's achieved through live lookup through the APIs from the employee directory system into the taxonomy management system. with on the basis of this consistent metadata, if you like, being applied to the employee directory, there can be better routing of CRM cases or management information to members of the organization based on the taxonomy profiles of those individuals. Okay, briefly, I'm going to look at human resource management, HRM, and in this particular case, I found as I was studying and researching to put this talk together, I was just seeing what was out there. So this particular example doesn't come from a Synaptica customer. It's a PDF that is available publicly on the internet, and I've got a link on the slide here if anybody would like to follow this. It did provide a very interesting case study from the British civil service, from British government, who are designing a global human resources knowledge model. And in there, they define human resource processes and the linkages between processes. I think the next slide provides a little bit more detail. So they basically got a structure of taxonomy that isn't a categorical breakdown of the of topics and subject matter. It's this human resources task or process leads to this sub-process and this process and so on. So this structure of interrelated processes is being modeled in the taxonomy. And again, this is quite a bit different from just tagging documents with topics. The next area I'm going to look at is engineering. So let's just have a look at engineering. So in this particular case, which I pulled from the Convergence Design Lab at Purdue University, again, there's a link to this document if you want to have a deep dive. There is the development of very granular taxonomy or ontology in this particular case. They're using OWL structures and classes and subclass structures for describing the detailed attributes of particular engineering components, and through the use of these very granular structures that go into, I mean, I'll just take one example. So a straight ejector pin going down to the ejector pin material, going down into a sub-branch of material structures or hardness attributes, etc. Through all of this ontologically structured data, the system is able to support engineering decision-making. And one example of that is find me replacement parts for this part that have the same tolerances, have the same dimensions, materials, etc. So in the engineering design world and component management world, this is a very interesting case. Another case in the engineering world is in processes, so manufacturing processes. And there is, in fact, an ISO specification, an ISO standard, which is based on the process specification language, PSL. And this is a formal semantic structure to define the exchange of process information about manufacturing processes. And this is used in production scheduling, process planning, workflow, business process engineering. All these different applications can use the semantic model that you will find in this particular ISO example. We do have customers who are using our graph-based tool to develop very structured descriptions of engineering components and processes. I couldn't share those for proprietary reasons, but these, this standard and the previous Purdue article, I think will give you insights into that world. The next area is product information management, or PIM. So what is PIM? What is it used for? PIM is used in the e-commerce and retail world, and it aims to provide a single source of truth for product content and metadata, and then surface that content across multiple digital and or print channels. Sorts of information that ends up in a PIM system includes categorical data, so basically taxonomy data, but also data that you wouldn't normally find in a taxonomy, such as product attributes, the specific sizes and measurements and colors that products come in, usage data, how something is used, when it's used, environments in which it's used, etc. Product stories, what's called emotional data, so reviews, product stories. All of this information belongs in the PIM world, as well as some of the actual media items that are used to generate a website, generate a product brochure. So we're getting into the world of digital asset management there with the media file, with the media files. And then there's also things like the upsell, cross-sell data. So if you buy this product, you might want to buy this, this subscription to replacement printer cartridges or whatever it may be. So all of that kind of cross-selling data belongs in a PIM system, as well as price and distribution channel data. So there's a lot. These are really kind of very specialized systems. So the PIM market is served by specialized PIM software. There's a lot of leading commercial software out there, and you can quickly search this and have a look at some of the leading players. There's also an open source software for PIM called PIM Core, with a link below. And like I say, this software is quite specialized and is doing a lot of different things, which are touch upon things like digital asset management, e-commerce, and taxonomy. But taxonomy is a key part of PIM. So in this screenshot, which is from the PIM core, you can see the building out of what we're all in the taxonomy world pretty familiar with, which is product categorization and structures, and where it departs from taxonomy management is where you sort of get into, I want the specific product attributes of this, whatever it may be. Now, the interesting thing is, one of the things that this is doing is it's creating data silos between taxonomy that's living in the PIM system and taxonomy that's living in the more general enterprise taxonomy management systems that businesses operate. And these kinds of silos are obviously not what we want. So in terms of how we can transcend that, there's really a couple of ways. One is obviously building links between the taxonomy stored in PIM and the taxonomy that is stored in a more general enterprise taxonomy management system. It might be that you control taxonomy in the centralized system and schedule to push that out to PIM, or even vice versa, that you pull in and synchronize. But to break through the silo of PIM taxonomy being separate from the rest of the enterprise, some kind of bridge should be built between those systems. The other way of doing this is to try and make the ontology more, encompass more of the PIM data. And this is something that we've been doing quite a bit of work on, where we take, in Graphite, it's an ontology modeling tool as well as a taxonomy management tool, we take product areas and we build out all of this kind of stuff. So we're putting in a categorical structure of the product taxonomies. But we also are linking out to a digital asset. The digital assets themselves aren't living in the system, but the linkages between things can, and brands and companies and things like cross-selling information. So we create semantic relationships literally called has substitute. This is a substitute product, has an accessory, can cross-sell, and so on. So we can model an awful lot into a rich ontology that is currently handled by PIM systems. I'm not saying that you can replace a PIM system with an ontology. The PIM systems really are specialist product. They're doing a lot of good stuff with rich content that you wouldn't want to force into an ontology, but there is the capability to express a lot of PIM logical structure in an ontology tool, and we are working with clients who are doing that. There's some further information I wanted to leave as well in terms of PIM, which is, these are some references that you might want to look at. E-class is an ontological structure for e-commerce, tens of thousands of product classes and down to product attributes. So that attribution data of their physical characteristics and so forth. E-class is a licensed data set. It's not public domain. It's a licensable vocabulary, links there to go and explore more about it, and some white papers as well as links to go and get the downloads. Good relations vocabulary is another really important vocabulary if you're looking at e-commerce, for a way of describing products and services, very friendly way and very search engine optimized. And lastly, I put a link down there to the 10 best PIM software applications. So if you're interested in the PIM world, you can go and check out some of those other software vendors. Supply chain management, very briefly. So supply chain, this is all getting very related to product and engineering type of data. But here we're also looking at the interrelationships between the members and parts of a supply chain. So can this be modeled in an ontology? It definitely can. And we've been doing some things with clients where we're looking at warehouse management, robotics warehouse management, and using ontologies to model what's coming in, what's going out, where it's going. In this particular slide, I've just got, this is a genericized little bit of information in which we are mapping the shippers and what gets shipped, and tracking information through the graph. Okay, and so business process management is the last main area that I want to talk about, and then we'll go into more of the wrapping up conclusions here. So BPM. So business process management is about discovering and analyzing and modeling how a business does its business. What processes does it go through? And several of our clients are creating ontologies and taxonomies that are modeling business processes. And the concepts in these taxonomies are not describing topics that you find in a document. They might be describing an action. So we might be describing verbs. We might be describing capabilities and actions and outcomes. And this is very different, a very different use of taxonomy than the traditional use cases. So the semantic relationships in these ontological schema are describing all of the interdependencies in these business processes within an enterprise. there is if you're interested in business process management, there is a fantastic resource available, linked through this slide. So the APQC is an organization you can join, and we've recently joined and become a member of that. They produce a lot of good information on knowledge management and benchmarking business processes and so forth. And the PCF, Process Classification Framework, is a vocabulary that you can download, free download in Excel format, of the hierarchies of various different business processes. So you can access that there. And this is what that looks like in modeled as a SCOS-based taxonomy in our application. So we've done some ETL on that file, pulled it in. It's now an RDF graph within Graphite, and it's a really rich resource describing pretty much every kind of business process you can imagine. So on screen here, I've got open developing the vision and strategy for the business, down to individual things like formulating your missions, identifying competitors, communications, etc. This is a really good process-oriented vocabulary. Another resource to share in this world is, again, with a link here, is the MIT Process Handbook, which is similar but different, and well worth a look if you're interested in exploring business process management and how taxonomy can possibly help with your enterprise. So, summary and takeaways. Traditional use cases for taxonomy is based on hierarchical control vocabularies used to tag documents in content management systems. And these structures then enhance search, they support browse, and they support content recommendations. Compared with some of the newer non-traditional roles for taxonomy, which are based on taxonomies that describe the logical structure and the business processes, including actions and interdependencies between processes. And these taxonomy structures and concepts are used to support decision-making, decision criteria, and to trigger actions that result from once something is in a particular state in the taxonomy or meets certain multiple criteria in the taxonomy, it will trigger actions. And through the triggering of actions and the supporting of decision trees and criteria, process-oriented taxonomies can optimize and standardize and automate business processes, producing obviously efficiencies and consistencies in the process. So that brings me to the end. There is a link here. This slide will be in the booth, in the Synaptica booth, if you want to go and download our guide to the whole world of taxonomies, ontologies, and knowledge graphs. And I'll pass back to Stephanie to see if there's any questions.
Great, thank you very much. I'll start with a question that we actually had in a previous presentation, but I think it is relevant in this one as well, where some of these larger organizations have enterprise taxonomies that are actually trying to support multiple of these types of applications simultaneously, and that can cause some friction in terms of governance or in terms of modeling. How do organizations that have these kinds of multiple applications work to try to build something that can support such diverse applications?
Okay, so just see if I can get video on 1 second. So in terms of diverse groups in the same enterprise working with a system, we've got a number of clients I can think of right now who are in this situation. I think the important thing is to identify the individual needs of these groups, and also create a collective or umbrella, if you like, of in the governance layer, because it's very important that people are the different groups with their different needs are working together, but have the freedom to develop schemes, to develop ontological structures that are independent of each other, but also that there's an awareness of what each of these teams is doing, and that they can share, because there's always going to be a lot of resource that is common among those different departments. And the more that they can have a governance body that looks, don't go create new properties and predicates in the graph, in the ontology, until you've seen what other groups have already developed, because there might be reusability there. But at the same time, I think it's really important that we don't make people feel they're sort of wearing a straitjacket, and they're not free to develop in the way that they want to as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think taxonomy has evolved past just being control of words, and having to support and allow for a lot more flexibility in model and structure to support some of these really specific and granular use cases. You can't necessarily use a PIM or a product lifecycle product taxonomy as navigation on your website, for example. So you can't, as you said, straitjacket business units in using taxonomy to achieve their use cases just because you're trying to standardize on a specific label necessarily. We have a question from Michelle, who's asking, what skills and or technologies should taxonomists add to their tool set to start being able to support some of these additional use cases and strategies?
Good question. So I think in terms of skills, taxonomy, if you're a taxonomist, I think you've got the right fundamental skills to develop in any of these non-traditional use cases that I've been talking to today. We are, in fact, no matter what we're doing, we are engaged in the process of organizing knowledge. So knowledge organization systems, KOS, is what we do. Whether we do that with topical vocabularies to help content be more findable, or we're working on process-oriented vocabularies, we're still organizing knowledge. I would certainly say some of the examples that I pulled on screen here, there are links in the slides to such as the business process taxonomy, or some of the engineering type applications. So I would say, go have a look at some of those other systems, go have a look at some of the reading materials about those other systems, and just see what other people are doing, so that you have awareness of capabilities. And then with the awareness of those capabilities, become an evangelist perhaps within your own enterprise. So if you're in the enterprise, you're already doing, let's say, traditional taxonomy, you're helping, the findability of internal content, or the surfacing of your content to the public web. Who are the other business units in your organization that might not yet be using taxonomy and could be using taxonomy to help improve, such as customer relation management, or part of the engineering design team, or part of the how you manage your supply chain? These are all good applications for taxonomy. I think your existing taxonomy skills will be enablers, but go and have a look at some of the other applications, and some of the other specialized tools, like for instance the PIM tools, which are really, they need to be their own tool, because they handle a lot of specialist functions there. There's that PIM core is open source. You can get that and play with it if that's of particular interest. But I don't think there's anything fundamentally different than core taxonomy skills about organizing knowledge, creating categories, creating relationships, and so on.
Great. We have a question from Elena. What are some of the main blockers you've seen in organizations that are trying to achieve this sort of idea of a comprehensive global taxonomy?
Yeah, so comprehensive and global taxonomies. I think some of the I would say that there's going to be two things that are potential blockers. One of them I will categorize as sort of IT related, and the other is really it's more about the organizational structure. So if we take the IT, one of the things I mentioned this in my Monday keynote is that's the difference between success or failure with the taxonomy project, is getting enough stakeholders in the room, not just the people who manage content and taxonomy. So whenever we onboard new clients in this world, we try to get in the enterprise architects, get in the people who run search, get in the people who run, discovery intranets and public-facing sites, because if the conversation is only held between the taxonomists and the direct content management managers that they work with, you can do an awful lot of work, and then it fails to socialize with the rest of the organization. Or IT might say, I'm just not familiar with this stuff. We can do everything we need with full text search. I mean, this is encountered many times. So socializing, I think the role of taxonomy and really driving home the benefits of taxonomy, which I try to cover in the in those opening slides. It's like taxonomy can really power so much in terms of improved search and discovery. You've really got to be an evangelist and make sure that the rest of the organization know it. So that's one potential blocker, is that sort of from a technology perspective, not everybody's bought in to the benefit. The other one is more organizational. So we work with some of the world's very, very big global corporations, and like many big global corporations, they have many subsidiary companies in the organization. And the challenge there is, how do you apply some kind of cohesion to the global business, and how do you support the business units, which might be any one of those individual business units might be a massive corporation in its own right. How do you support some level of commonality and some level of divergence, which is, and it might be divergence in terms of terminology. It's like, company X in our big global empire calls it this. We don't, and there's no way we will. So one business unit might have their preferred terminology for exactly the same thing as another business unit. And if you try to impose a monolithic taxonomy solution across a big global business, I think you're asking for trouble. But at the same time, you will at some point want to provide harmonized search, and that means building mappings between how one company in the empire describes it and another.
Kind of along those lines, I think another area that's hard to get cohesion across a fairly wide range of activities is product lifecycle management. We have a question from Carolyn. Can you share some thoughts on using taxonomies to track products across their lifecycle, from finance to engineering to go to market, end of life, so on and so forth? It's a little bit broader than PIM, I think.
Yeah, definitely a little bit broader than PIM. Probably a little bit more, I would say, coverable by that APQC business process vocabulary, which is attempting to cover everything from the highest level strategy of the business through, how does marketing do its processes, how does engineering build its processes, etc. So I don't have any direct insights there, because we haven't directly engaged in something that is on product lifecycle management, or that sort of end-to-end there. So I won't pretend to come up with neat answers to that, but conceptually how I would go about it is I would probably go about it with something like that very broad business process vocabulary, and try to say, you know, how does this describe the end-to-end of our business processes, and can we, you know, use this as an umbrella vocabulary and then start creating links from sections of it to more specific vocabularies that deal with those specific departments or functions in the life cycle of a product. So, you know, you might have you might have an umbrella business process vocabulary that then sections of it link off to the engineering team, and sections of it link off to the marketing team, and so forth. So, you know, it's basically building an ecosystem of vocabularies that describe as much of your business as you need to. So sorry, that's not a definitive answer, but that's how I would probably go about it.
I think that's a good core concept, this idea of the umbrella. And I know you have a nice graphic on this sort of idea of the umbrella set of shared concepts that can branch off into separate classifications. So you could also, from the product perspective, create these core product concepts, but allow the finance team to have their own sort of financial classification and the engineering team to have their own engineering classifications, as long as they all point back to that umbrella stub concept for the core product. So I think that idea of the umbrella is really important. And we are out of time with that last question. Thank you so much, Dave, for this great view of where taxonomy is heading and what all the variety of applications it's being used for. And hope to see you all in the next session at 12:30.
All right, thank you. And I'll be in the booth if anyone has any further questions in the Synaptica booth during the break. Thanks very much.
Excellent, thank you.